Welcome to Future Squared, the podcast all about corporate innovation and entrepreneurship. My name is Steve Glaveski, and each week I'll bring you authors, corporate innovation managers, entrepreneurs, and above all else, thought leaders on the topics of innovation, entrepreneurship, and self-improvement. Future Squared brings you a double dose of innovation inspiration every week to help you successfully navigate your innovation journey. Every Monday, I'll bring you a world-class thought leader such as Steve Blank, Alex Osterwalder, Neil Patel, Rand Fishkin, or Whitney Johnson, just to name a few. While every Friday, I'll bring you some quick digestible insights myself to help end your week on a high before you head off for the weekend. Future Squared is proudly brought to you by Collective Campus, an innovation hub, school, and consultancy that works with large organizations to help them adopt the mindset, methodologies, and tools required to explore new business models and disruptive innovation in an era of rapid change. If your organization needs support coming up with ideas, testing and turning those ideas into reality, incubating teams, driving cultural change, or connecting and partnering with startups, then visit Collective Campus online at www.collectivecamp.us. And without further ado, here's today's podcast. Welcome back to Future Squared for another episode. Today I'm going to be speaking with Jenny Blake. She's an author, speaker, career and business strategist, and executive coach with expertise on systems, efficiency, and career fluidity in the rapidly evolving knowledge economy. She's the author of the newly released book Pivot and previously Life After College, which was based on her blog of the same name. Jenny helps leaders, employees, and entrepreneurs achieve greater clarity, engagement, fulfillment, and impact. Formerly, Jenny spent over 5 years at Google doing training, coaching, and career development. During her time there, she taught coaching best practices to Google executives all over the world as part of a global career guru program she helped create, later praised by CNNMoney in Google's #2 company to work for acknowledgment. She advocates looking at career as a smartphone, not a ladder, essentially dynamic and customizable to each individual, and helps employees and entrepreneurs pivot before they leap by finding further growth within their company or existing assets and strengths to avoid feeling like their only option is to quit. This was a really fun interview. It actually took place late at night here in Melbourne, about 10:30 p.m. Melbourne time, while it was about 7:30 in the morning over in New York, so Jenny's time. And neither one of us is accustomed to taking part in interviews at these types of hours. So it was really fun, and it was funny that we both had a sip of David Asprey's Brain Octane in our tea, which was, I suppose, enough to get us into flow. Get those ketones going, get the conversation going, but you'll find that despite, I wouldn't say there was a slow start, but definitely within the first 5 minutes we got going, and there was definitely no issues getting into flow. So with that, it gives me much pleasure to introduce you to the one, the only, Jenny Blake. Welcome to the show, Jenny.
Steve, thanks so much for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the program. As we were saying before I hit that record button, I have been listening to your show, and I do find it to be one of the more engaging podcasts, particularly on the topic of, just kind of like the whole entrepreneurship space and personal reinvention and just going out there and doing amazing things in the world. So congratulations on what I think is an awesome podcast.
Thank you so much for saying that. I talk about launch and iterate and get scrappy, and the podcast is one example of that. I have no clue what I'm doing. It's been about 2 years, and I'm having a really fun time with it.
Yeah.
So I figure that's the best any of us can do, is just start something, and if we're enjoying it, keep learning.
Definitely.
And iterating on it, and who knows where it will take us.
Yeah.
So, same to you.
Well, thank you so much. And it's I guess, with a lot of podcasts, you'll find, and it's the same with yours, it's the same with mine, even Tim Ferriss, you go back to the early episodes and the sound quality is like terrible, but over time it gets better and better, and the interviewing skills get better, and it's funny how that happens. Like, it doesn't matter who you are in the world, there is that sort of, like you said, scrappy, start small and improve over time.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned, it's so true. We can listen to each other's shows and see how the interviewing skills change. And there are still interviews now, almost 2 years in. I feel so awkward. And people probably, I don't know if anyone listening thinks, oh yeah, they've just got it down after a certain amount of time. But I don't know about you. I'm always feeling a little awkward, but that's how I know I'm stretching myself.
Yeah.
Really trying to stay present in the moment with things.
Yeah, and if you're not feeling awkward, if you're not feeling uncomfortable, yeah, you're not stretching yourself. That's exactly right. So let's stretch ourselves rather on this show today, because it's 7:30 a.m. over there, and as you were saying, before we hit the record button, you normally don't do podcasts before 11 a.m. It's 10:30 p.m. on this side of the world in Melbourne. So just so our audience knows where our heads are at right now, neither one of us is in flow. Neither one of us is in optimal podcasting state right now, but we're going to rock and roll anyways.
Well, I would say, though, I don't know. I think we could be in flow because, at least I'll speak from on my end. For some reason, when you reached out, I was like, yes, this needs to happen. So,
yeah.
Although I don't normally, I am very excited to be here. So
awesome.
I will say that.
Well, I'm super excited to have you.
Flow.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Cool. So first up, Jenny, congrats on the release of Pivot. Your first book. It's received critical acclaim. I was looking at some of the names that have said amazing things about your book, like Josh Kaufman, James Altucher, who recently interviewed you on your podcast, and Seth Godin, who basically said, and I quote, "Jenny Blake is here to remind us that we live in a different time and the possibilities are endless as long as we're willing to pivot." Now, that's an awesome testimonial from someone as admired and as respected as Seth Godin. So the book's been out for a month now. I imagine it's been quite a whirlwind sort of experience from writing the book to pre-release to post-release. How's it all come along?
It's been good. Believe it or not, it's actually my second book.
Oh, sorry, your second book.
That's okay. Compared to the first time around, the process went much smoother. So I learned, my first book came out 5.5 years ago. It's called Life After College. And at that time, I was living in California, working at Google. I didn't know any authors, and I was so petrified. It's very vulnerable to try and put ideas down on paper that are going to get kind of like locked in bookstone and not be able to change. And so with this book, I felt like with Pivot, it was not just for one age group. I really landed on something that it felt like people needed, and myself included, I really needed, because I kept hitting what felt like a quarter life or midlife crisis every few years. And I will say about the writing and launching process itself, I made a point this time around not to say or complain, oh, this is so hard. I really felt like it's a privilege to work on a book, and even with the launch, it's very easy to kind of burn out trying to do everything. And I just tried to be more strategic about how I launched so that I could enjoy the process. I mean, I talk a lot in Pivot that, yes, we want to go for professional success, but the peaks where we actually finish something and we're not coming in or out of a pivot, they're few and far between. So it's really important to me to enjoy the process of something as much as the thing itself.
Yeah, and absolutely love that. And I love that you touched on the topic of not labeling things as being, say, hard. And I think there's probably a lesson there in general when people associate something or label something as being a certain way, then that's it. Like, we're going to say, okay, well, writing a book is hard, so we're not going to do this. But just enjoy the process. And rather than saying, well, we've got to write 60,000 words, just focus on the word you're writing right now and just enjoy that process as you go.
Yeah, and no doubt, it's definitely complex. But one thing that I learned, because writing a book and how do you structure it and diagrams and then what goes where, and then when you're working with I don't even know, 300-page Word file, however long, it gets really unwieldy. So the word I would use is complex. And what I realized is, and no doubt anybody listening to this podcast, I call them high net growth individuals. So these are people who maybe, money is important. Nobody wants to be a starving artist, but that they optimize for learning and growth and making an impact. So we actually are thirsty for complex projects. I think we would be bored without them. And the same goes for broader career and business changes and entrepreneurship and solopreneurship, that if we can learn to celebrate some amount of complexity and Rubik's cubing, if I just go ahead and make that a verb, around this puzzle that is our lives and our businesses and our projects, let's have fun with it because I think we would be bored otherwise.
Oh, couldn't agree more. And I guess to give our audience a little bit of context about Pivot and where you're coming from. I mean, you spent 5 years working at Google. At one point, you worked under Sheryl Sandberg, who's now at Facebook and also famous for pinning Lean In. And I know you admired her, but you've been quoted as saying you didn't want to become her. Hence the pivot towards being the writer and speaker that you are today. And I guess I'm a big fan of Vishen Lakhiani, who wrote Code of the Extraordinary Mind, and he talks about breaking out of the culturescape. And essentially, that's what you did, because a lot of us come through this, I suppose, funnel where it's get the degree, get the job, climb the ladder, whereas you've talked about this concept of coming down the ladder. So do you want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't include that in the book, but it was true that I had been exactly climbing the corporate ladder. I became a manager at Google by the time I was 24. And kind of as I slowly started to realize as I was getting into management tasks, I really enjoyed coaching people. But as I looked up the chain, I didn't want to be organizing and managing hundreds of employees someday, if not thousands. That felt like a lot of pressure to me. It always felt like a sense of pressure, and nor did I want to be pinched in the rungs of middle management either. Like so many people above and below me. It didn't really fit my strengths. And so I gave myself permission because I'll say growing up, I liked playing business as a kid. I loved business and leadership. So at first I thought, well, that's just what you do. You just climb and climb so you get to the top. And it wasn't until I sort of stepped sideways, leaned sideways, that I realized I'm really happy on my own. And I did not ever think I was cut out for entrepreneurship, actually. When I worked at Google, I always got good performance reviews. In school, I was a straight A student. Essentially, I felt like I was good at following directions. But who was to say that I'd be good on my own with no structure? And I love structure. So I was worried about that. But from the day I left, and it's been 5.5 years now, I have not once regretted that decision, even when I was at Financial Bureau. I still didn't regret leaving, and I still partner with Google to this day. So I'm very grateful that even though I left, they still hire me and bring me back in, and I love it. Like, I love Google. They're my favorite company to work with from the outside. I just don't want to be employed full time.
Yeah. I totally get that. And having left the safety and comfort of an investment bank about 5 years ago to start my own company, I can totally relate. And like yourself, while there was a massive pay cut to start with for the first couple of years, there's definitely been no regrets and absolutely love every day. So yeah, it is a common theme, especially I'm sure lots of people in our audience could relate to that or are hoping to emulate that type of thing. So hopefully we can give them some pointers in the next half an hour or so. But on disrupting yourself, Jenny, I mean, you did leave Google and then you moved to New York, which I know you're a huge fan of New York, so that was something you always wanted to do. But all the while, I mean, you did say, I think in one of the episodes you recorded, I think it was with James Altucher, where I guess you went from, the safety of a healthy big bang paycheck to living in an apartment where you didn't have that recurring income coming in. Was there a healthy dose, I suppose, of self-doubt and what am I doing?
Completely. Because after Life After College came out and I left Google, I rode the adrenaline of that for about 1.5 years. And Steve, I'm actually curious of your experience when you left the investment bank, both how you pivoted to running your own business, but how you did it in a way that you weren't starting from scratch, and what your kind of 2 years in looked like. But for me, 2 years in, I was like, what's next? I'd become the girl who left Google, the girl who left college. So I couldn't see ahead of me. And that's why I paused all my business activities, and I kind of started to get down to zero. And when I was dwindling financially, I felt like, am I delusional? I really wanted to get real with myself. Is the jig up? Don't be unrealistic. You're an adult. I didn't feel right asking friends or family, pretty much family, for a loan. That just didn't feel right. I didn't feel responsible. It felt like if I have a broken business model, I need to fix it, and I need it to hurt until I fix it. So I didn't try and even save myself from getting to zero, really, unless it was going to be through my business model. And so it got to the point where I didn't know how I was going to pay rent in 2 weeks. And I got a little angry. I'd been reading personal development books since I was 18 years old, and business books and finance books, and none of them were getting me out of this pickle of what's next. And that's when I started to say, this is unacceptable. And I'm really big into systems and efficiency. And I felt like, both for myself and others, if we're going to be asking what's next more often in this economy every few years, we have got to get better at it. And that's what inspired me to focus on pivot and create the 4-stage pivot method and reverse engineer my changes and those of others. And how about you, Steve? I'm curious, how did you leave your investment banking job in a way that wasn't doing a 180?
Well, I was not as brave as you, because I managed to build a minimum viable product for an idea I had, which was a company called Hot Desk. So basically an Airbnb for office space. And I managed to raise about 150K in seed funding while I was working at the investment bank. Completely unrelated. The funding didn't come from the bank, but that was more or less my safer or easier ticket out, because then I did have funding to support myself for a little bit of time, which I suppose it was a 2-year period, and I just spent that time really honing in on those entrepreneurial skills. Like that particular startup did not take off, but the learnings that I got in that 2-year period, I've been applying for the last 3 years, and now what I'm working on with my team is definitely a lot more rewarding on numerous levels. But that's, I suppose, something. I think the lesson in that is that today you don't necessarily need to, jump off the cliff with no parachute. If you are in a full-time job and not digging it, you can build small prototypes. Dip your toe into the water, try and generate some sort of an income for an idea before you take that plunge, because it's not either or. You can do both and test different things, see what works for you, and then make that move.
Absolutely. And I love how that's a great example of bridge income, having something that helps you build a bridge from your job into self-employment, which is awesome. I love the idea.
Yeah. I think it's becoming a lot more accessible now. I mean, the barriers to entry are so low. As you were saying, as you were alluding to there, with technology changing as frequently as it is, people need to become more adaptable. But with that comes more opportunity. With cloud computing and today's internet access, building something and getting in front of the world, i.e. your podcast, i.e. my podcast, doesn't require a lot of money. I mean, $100 in equipment and an internet connection, and suddenly you're transmitting to people in all corners of the globe.
I know, it's so incredible. And I just get absolutely giddy at how many tools exist now, Web 2.0 type tools, that make running a business so much easier. I mean, I think even for both of us 5 years ago, we lucked out. We hit a really good time where you really did just need a laptop and an internet connection. But now there's even more amazing stuff. Like, I don't know if you use, or anyone listening, it's kind of the geek outside of systems, but tools like if this, then that, and Zapier that help apps talk to each other.
Yeah.
So it's like, if a purchase comes through here, then send a zap and add them to this mailing list here, and stuff like that. It's just, we can automate so much of our own jobs, which is a really good thing, because it frees us up for that high level creative thinking and relationship building that we are uniquely suited to compared to, say, robots. Definitely.
And I'm glad you brought that point up. I'm a massive productivity geek, and I know you developed something called the Business Ninja Tech Toolkit, which is a list of curated tools and techniques to keep people effective, efficient, and sane. So, I mean, what are some of the tools? You've mentioned Zapier and Ifis. What are some of the other tools you use, say, on a daily basis that, let's just say, what are 3 tools you can't live without?
Oh my goodness. Well, Dropbox, Evernote, Google Drive, and Google everything. But the funny thing is, I read a book, I forget the name, but he talked about how these are our new utility companies. That just like we have just like we have water and gas for our apartments, that, Drive, Dropbox, and Evernote, these are like our big utilities now. So those are almost a given. But I will say one way that how I use Evernote, especially when I'm brainstorming on a new project, is harvesting. So I start collecting. Right now I have an Evernote notebook called Curiosity, and I clip articles that are interesting, and I save or write down anecdotes, things that happen in my life that are kind of interesting, that could be stories for a book, and ideas like for concepts and principles.
Yeah.
And so I encourage everybody listening, if you don't already, have some kind of harvest file where you might not even have the specifics of exactly what you're building, but you're starting to clip things that grab your attention. And I look forward, I haven't gone back on purpose, but I look forward to pretty soon looking back to my Curiosity notebook and seeing what's in here and what do they have in common, what are the common or overarching themes, how do these things all connect to each other.
Well, that's it. And I think people have their best ideas, especially when they don't expect it. You could be going for a run, in the shower, whatever it is, and just having something handy like a notebook, or I like to use Asana just to track.
I love Asana. Oh my gosh, that has to go on my list.
Oh, Asana's the best. Like any little idea I have that I must do, I'll just add it to my Asana. It's out of my brain. I don't need to think about it. And then maybe, every morning I'll go through my to-do list. It may be something that I'll do tomorrow, or it may be something that I'll just keep in a backlog and I'll get to it in a month's time. But as long as I capture it somewhere, I don't have to stress out about forgetting about it.
I agree. And Asana has changed the game. I use it with my VA team and my assistant. And it used to be really clunky. Anybody who tried Asana a year or two ago would have hated it. Well, probably. I did at least. But I have to say, now it's gotten so much better and easier to use, and it's been a game changer. I feel like nothing falls through the cracks anymore.
Definitely. And you mentioned VA team, so I imagine anything you do that can be codified. Although, hang on, having said that, I do recall you saying something about you actually editing your podcast.
Yes, I was editing it and really enjoying it. And then when I started to get into book launch zone, I found a great guy through my friend Srini Rao. He has the Unmistakable podcast, and he recommended this amazing guy, Ram. So part of my up-leveling when I was launching the book was delegating the next level of stuff that I previously didn't want to let go of.
Yeah.
So as of just a few months ago, I started sending Ram some episodes for editing. And it's not that I won't ever edit an episode again, but it's nice to have choice. It's nice to know I know how to do this myself, and I also have a person in mind that I can delegate when I need to.
Well, that makes sense. And I guess that means you need to find something else to do on your Saturday mornings. Because wasn't that like a little treat on your Saturday mornings, editing your podcast?
Oh my gosh. Yes. And now my Saturday mornings are for rest. I wrote, after the book launch, I did as much as I could for 2 weeks, like hardcore and some traveling. And then I wrote to my list, I said, the furry rest monster swallowed me whole. As soon as I got back, I just laid out horizontal on a couch. A good week. And even now, even though now I'm slowly getting back to work, I'm still feeling. So you're absolutely right. Saturday mornings, I'm now giving myself permission to rest.
Hey, well, you've totally earned it. So,
Thank you.
So, I mean, aside from the 2 books, I mean, Life After College was inspired by your blog of the same name, but you set up Pivot Coaching, and I guess you you provide personalized one-on-one support to help people essentially pivot. So I imagine you would have worked with some amazing talents, a lot of cool people, but who were in some way, shape, or form, I guess, slaves to some preconceived idea that they need to climb the corporate ladder. I mean, how have you gone about breaking people out of that mindset? I mean, do you have any stories to tell?
The biggest thing that often holds people back is fear, especially if they're high net growth individuals and responsible and pragmatic. So nowhere in the book do I say, take great leaps. Just take this leap of faith. Pivoting is about a very methodical shift that involves doubling down on what's already working in a new related direction. So when I have clients come to me, I tell the story of one in the book. His name's Brian in the book, and that he had a wife and three kids, and he was working at a technology company as a high-level engineering director. So for that kind of person, leaving is not an easy choice. And it's not like you would, I think what swept the blogosphere and the podcastosphere 5 years ago was quit your job, start a business, 4-hour work week type stuff. And for someone like this client, Brian, no, he couldn't just kind of quit his job on a whim. So I like to just help people acknowledge it's perfectly okay to have fear around career change because our livelihood is at stake. That said, of course, when you hit a pivot point, especially if you're high net growth and impact, you're not going to be able to stay there for long. So the biggest mistake people make is too quickly jumping to what's out there. They immediately start looking outside of themselves for answers. And I did the same thing. This was the mistake that kept me stuck for longer, focusing on what I didn't know and what I didn't have. And so the best thing to do is look at what's already working. What is it about my strengths, my interests, my day-to-day that I'm enjoying? What do people come to me for advice on? And what does success look like a year from now? That tends to bracket the pivot, and you could worry about how, the logistics, later. And also another big thing is small experiments. So, but I'll say in the case of Brian, as soon as we were clear on his 1-year vision, an opportunity seemed to fall from the sky. I mean, he got offered, a venture capital firm reached out and said, hey, do you want to become the SVP at this startup? He was willing to take a year off in between jobs, and they approached him. And because he had gotten clear on his parameters for what success would look like in the next role, he felt like he was in a good position to take it. So again, that clarity, it can't be overstated about, even if you don't know all the specifics, how important it is to just vision about what is your ideal average day? What does success look like a year from now? What kind of impact do you want to have? What would you love to become an expert in? Who would you love to develop relationships with or even learn from afar?
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. And I think that ties in with your philosophy that you don't want to do a complete 180, but essentially, as the title of the book suggests, you want to pivot. You want to identify your strengths, perhaps what you're passionate about, what your purpose is. And I guess on that, passion versus purpose, is passion enough, or should we be directing our pivots based on other variables? Like purpose, for example.
It's one component. At passion, I like to look for 3 things when I run an experiment. Do I enjoy this? Can I become an expert at it? And is there room to expand in the market? So if you have a passion for underwater basket weaving, no, that's probably not enough. But if you can find ways and really have one ear to the ground of what do people need? So for example, I'll give you a real-time example. I just launched Pivot. I've been working on it for 3 years. I'm at my own pivot point now of what's next. Again, I have these pilots for my business of different income streams, but I don't know which one is going to take off yet, which is very interesting. And I'm also thinking, okay, what about book number 3? Not that I'm in any hurry, but what should I write about? And for a couple of weeks now, I've had these ideas that I'm super excited to write about and study. But then I realized I don't know that people need them. I don't know that they're in pain around some of these ideas. And that, it's not like, I want people to be in pain, but I will say that with Pivot, it was really seemed to meet a need where people said, oh my gosh, I need that book. Oh, I'm at a pivot point myself, or oh my gosh, I just got laid off, or this or that, or have a friend. And there were so many people who were facing a pivot point that the reaction has been so positive of like, oh yes. And so part of my work as an entrepreneur and as a creator is not just to say, what am I excited to write about? No doubt I cannot write something if I'm not excited to do it and buy the material like, oh yeah, I can't wait to dig into this for 5 years, because that's really what the commitment is. But I also have to say, what do people really need? What are they asking for? What are they struggling with? What is hurting people that I can help alleviate in some way? And it's a bit of a different question. And so the intersection of the two is where it starts to get interesting.
Yeah. So essentially, what are you great at? What can generate income, and what do you enjoy? So the coalescence of those 3 things coming together.
And what do people need? And so I think that's so key. You've got to be listening. You can't. The mistakes I've made in my business are when I said, what should my business model be? And I thought only top down about my business model instead of saying, how can I be most helpful to people? What do people really need? And then I also talk in the book about project-based purpose, that it's okay if any of you listening don't have some grand overarching purpose statement that drives your whole life. And sometimes people feel pressure to have that. Instead, if you can tackle a job or a project and just for those, let's say 2 or 3 years, plus or minus. What's your project-based purpose? Why are you doing this work now? And if it's just to get paid and fund a pivot runway for the future, no problem. But you just identify why you're in what you're doing now and what's important to you and what you want to get out of it. And then take the pressure off of having to answer it for a lifetime.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of, I suppose, hype in the media, especially when it comes to, your startup, entrepreneur media, that you need to go out and build a unicorn and create all this huge impact in the world. But there's nothing wrong with perhaps building a lifestyle business or just building, like you said, a project that you're going to learn a hell of a lot from for the next 6 months to 1 year or 2 years. And, going back to that, I suppose, recurring theme in this episode, with technology moving as quickly as it is, you need to be adaptable, and chances are if you go into it with some big 20-year strategic plan, chances are in like 3 or 4 years, the world's probably going to look quite different, so that plan may not work anyways, and you're going to have to change regardless.
Yes, exactly. And not to take that change personally. I know, as I mentioned earlier, I was asking myself, am I delusional? What's wrong with me? Why am I hitting these pivot points every few years? And the thing to realize is that plateaus are often a product of our success, that we've accomplished something and we've made it to the next level in our Super Mario Kart video game. And so to understand that I cannot begin to tell you, first of all, I wish we could see everyone who's listening right now, and I could ask you, how many of you are either just going into or coming out of a pivot. When I was working on the book, from the time I interviewed people to a year and a half later when I went to fact check, almost every single person had changed. And so that was shocking to me that the statistics show the average 10 years, 4 to 5 years. Almost, 90% of people that I interviewed changed within the year. And of course, I either attract very pivoty people, which is probably true, but so many of them changed not just by choice, but by circumstance.
Yeah.
Their company got acquired, then they got fired, they started a business, they folded the business, they had to pivot, they went back into corporate. I mean, I saw it all, and I was really surprised. I thought, this is happening way more quickly than... So anyway, that's all to say, if you experience that anxiety and fear and uncertainty and insecurity, you're not alone. You're totally normal. It's probably a product of your success as much as anything.
Yeah.
And if you can eliminate the self-flagellation, I won't say self-doubt, because that's going to, for most of us, that's the part of this. But don't beat yourself up for too long. Just start to look at, again, what's working and build from there. And that puts fuel in the tank.
Yeah, definitely. And you touched on a few great points there. And one is, I suppose, on people who change by choice. Say someone has a side hustle. A question I often get asked is, how do I know when I should make the jump and turn this side hustle into my full-time gig? Do you have any thoughts on that?
It really depends. So pivot runway is how much savings do you have in the bank? How long can they last you? I recommend at least 6 months. Some rule of thumb say make sure your side hustle is earning equal to or greater than your salary. I wasn't able to do that. I was so tired just from trying to do my book and blog on nights and weekends and work at Google. And I had a very intense job at Google, and I was earning $0 when I quit. I can't say I super recommend that, but I did have a platform that I had been building for 5 years. So when I did leave, I actually got a ton of coaching clients because they saw what I had done and they wanted to leave their jobs and do something similar. So even if you don't have equal income, make sure you have a platform that can generate leads. And so barring that, it might need to stay a side hustle for a little longer. And then a third criteria is what we talked about with you, Steve, bridge income. So let's say you know it's time to leave your full-time job and you pivot into your side hustle, but maybe you need to take some other job, part-time consulting or a barista job or a bartending job, anything that's going to provide recurring steady cash flow, call it a cash flow cow, that allows you to fund, you're almost incubating your own side hustle at that point. And so however you want to swing the finances, different people have different risk tolerance, but that's some of the stuff I talk about. I have a whole chapter on finances because it matters. Yeah. I felt like it didn't make sense to talk about career change without saying, change costs money, and your financial flexibility will impact the timing and scope of your pivot.
Yeah, and I think with white collar professionals, I mean the opportunities today to do some, say, 3-month contracting gigs where the daily rates can be quite favorable. Earn a bit of money, put quite a bit aside, and then, say, run those short experiments and see what works. And if it doesn't, hey, go find another 3-month contract gig or a 6-month gig, or get onto some of these platforms such as Expert 360 and some of the others where you can pick up a short-term consulting gig to keep you going and keep that, cash flow cow fed.
Yeah. Yes, I love that. I'd never heard it said like that. That's brilliant.
Keep it fed or keep it grazing. Maybe that's even more apt.
Yeah, that's great. I love that visual. And what's funny too is I talk about sometimes the grass is greener.
Ah,
the idea of a cash flow cow grazing on the greener grass is your next direction.
I can see an infographic in the making. So I guess I wanted to touch on something that I found quite interesting around. You basically take January off every year to experiment living abroad. So you experiment living abroad, running your business from remote parts of the globe. I suppose, keen to find out, where did you go last January? And I mean, what's the plan for this January?
Oh my gosh, fun question. Well, yes, I've done Bali and Thailand in the past. And then last January was Tulum, Mexico, and I went by myself over New Year's, and I made friends the first night who I hung out with the whole week. So that was really a cool experience. But I will say, I did Tulum for shorter because it's a little more expensive, and it was too soon. I came back mid-January, and I went back. I went back to Tulum to visit because I was like, I'm not ready to be back. I really cherished the time away. And so this year, if I can swing it, my plan is to go to Buenos Aires, Argentina, and try and get fluent in Spanish, because I'm right now awkward but close if I really lived somewhere. So that's the goal.
Yeah. I ventured out to Brazil for the World Cup in 2014, and it's a long flight from Melbourne, Australia, and it's a crazy long flight. So I downloaded the Duolingo app and spent so much time on the plane just picking up basic Portuguese, but it was enough for me. Once I got on the ground, it was a group of 4 of us, and we'd be going out to restaurants, catching cabs, and everyone would just be relying on me to kind of translate in some form of broken Portuguese. But hey, people were responding, and they admired the fact that, hey, there's this guy from Australia, he's making an effort, because the locals really appreciate that. And by being on the ground, I was able to just hone in and just, I suppose, accelerate that learning. So definitely going down to Buenos Aires. You pronounce it better than me, but I'm just going to call it Buenos Aires. And it's definitely going to take your Spanish to that next level.
That's my hope. Yeah. So I'm still balancing things out post book launch and even financially. So we'll see. We'll see how this quarter unfolds, but that's the hope. Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. So I wanted to just touch on some of the amazing guests you've had on your podcast. I mean, at the top of this show, I did say you've got a great podcast, and you've had no shortage of awesome guests such as Kevin Kelly from Wired, Ryan Holiday. I've mentioned that James Altucher interviewed you recently. And I guess for me, I've interviewed some amazing people like Rand Fishkin from Mars, Neil Patel, Steve Blank, yourself, of course, now. And I tend to notice common threads across, the way, I suppose, high performers think and act. And I'm sure you've come across some themes. I mean, what are some common threads that your guests share, be it, philosophies, rituals, routines, and so on?
One is a love of learning. The people that I've interviewed are naturally curious, whether they're curious about people, or in the case of Kevin Kelly, which was so fun.
Yeah.
He's really curious about new technology, and he's always trying new stuff, and people are always sending it to him. So curiosity. I think there's a willingness to try and read trends. Not everybody can be a futurist. There's a big debate. Like, is it even possible to be a futurist? What kind of, is that a BS
what is
word?
That?
Just like thought leader,
Yeah.
But I think we can all become a little bit of a futurist, which is, what are the trends and what am I excited to try and ride on the early side? Now, I don't always hit that. I was super late to podcasting, like extremely late. But I have to say, starting it. So I'd say a third skill is being willing to experiment and take low risk bets. Mm-hmm. And podcasting for me, I was super scrappy, started with, like you said, really terrible audio quality, uploading to SoundCloud. And then only later I taught myself GarageBand, downloaded intro, outro music. And so Pivot Podcast, even if I had 0 listeners, it's been one of the most rewarding things I've done professionally, in large part to getting to interview my heroes, which you've mentioned many of them. And so I think part of that is finding ways to add value in the world. And there's this kind of weird advice in the career space of find a mentor. And I've always been very conservative about who I reach out to and when. I don't try and just make a list of everyone I admire and then go ask them for things. And I think sometimes there's a tendency to want to do that. Instead, I try and become an interesting person that they would want to connect with, or create value through something like the podcast or interviewing them for my book, where it's a mutual value experience. And so I think that some of the, what a lot of these people have in common too, Ryan Holiday talks about it. I loved what he had to say on the episode we did together about he would offer to guys like Tim Ferriss marketing and consulting for free. And he did that for a few different authors and deliberately underpriced or didn't charge at all. But then now those authors have referred countless people and have completely helped build up his business. But that in the beginning, it's so much more about giving. And on James Altucher, he talks about asking someone, how can I help you, is just giving them more work. So it's better to just send someone an idea or 2 or 10 and go from there. And I will say there have been certain people who've reached out. I don't always have the space to do a lot, but like someone who's I have a private momentum community for where I kind of keep in touch with pivot people on an ongoing basis. And one of those most amazing original members, Theo, we started developing a friendship because he reached out and he said, here are a couple bugs I'm noticing on your website, or here are a couple errors or typos. And he caught stuff that nobody had caught, and it had been there for years. And I was so grateful. So how you help someone doesn't have to be a huge project proposal, but you're just, adding little value, and then it builds organically over time. So I think that's another trait that I've noticed.
Definitely. And I actually had this conversation over dinner earlier tonight around people who contact you and they'll say something, hey, can I pick your brain about X? And it's all well and good. Like, yes, you want to give back, but if you're short on time, you're far more likely to help give back if there is some sort of a mutual trade-off. And so, I think you mentioned James Altucher. Was it James that was reaching out to Tim Ferriss?
No, Ryan Holiday.
Sorry, Ryan Holiday.
On the marketing front, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And ultimately, when people are reaching out, if you're reaching out to certain thought leaders and people that you admire, perhaps think about what you can do for them in some way, shape, or form. Like it may be something as simple as saying, hey, I noticed these bugs on your website. I know initially with my podcast, I managed to reach out to, Steve Blank, who I am a massive admirer of. But it was all about, what can I do for him? And I knew he was building his corporate innovation. He was writing a book on corporate innovation. I said, hey, look, we've got a huge audience in Australia. Our market, our listenership is essentially corporate executives, so it's going to give you exposure to a whole new audience potentially. We're doing quite well on the charts in iTunes, so there's a win-win. Like, I get to speak to someone I really admire, I get a great person on the show, but for him, there is benefit as well. And just thinking about things from that perspective will open a lot more doors for you than if you were to just say, hey, can I pick your brain about X? Or, hey, I really admire you, can you mentor me? So I think just a lesson in that for our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I love everything you just said. It's so true. And congrats on all the momentum you've been able to build. It's really
Thank
exciting.
you. Yeah, it's super exciting. And like yourself, I'm sure, while the podcast, it does have its commercial and its business, reasons behind it and whatnot, but ultimately it's a lot of fun, and it's so much fun connecting with, people like yourself, Jenny, and, I've interviewed about 40 or 45 others, and you've interviewed an absolutely amazing list of people. And I think you learn so much, and you find yourself connecting the dots between things you've learned from all the different guests, whether you're having a conversation with someone, whether you're writing a blog post, and you don't realize how much you're actually learning just by speaking to so many different amazing thought leaders.
It's really true. And then it's fun to go back and, again, this concept of reverse engineering, but what have I unknowingly been exploring or gotten curious about, or what are the themes? What are people saying that it has in common?
Yeah.
And it's kind of a very organic way to let a new direction unfold. And that's so much of asking what's next, is we don't always have the answer up front. Sometimes it is revealed to us.
Exactly. And that's, I think Steve Jobs put that best, where we only connect the dots looking backwards, not looking forwards.
Exactly, yes.
Cool. Look, I am conscientious of time, so I'm going to jump into our lightning round, Jenny. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's do this. So this is where I ask all of my guests 2 hypotheticals and 1 on lifestyle design. So question number 1 is, if you could work for any company at any stage of the company life cycle, be it a company today or a company from the 19th century, who would it be and why?
Oh my goodness. So I'm so grateful to have worked at Google, because that was just really fun. I love tech, and to be there, I was there as a group from 6,000 to 36,000. That was just a wild ride in the building. But so yeah, I would do that again. I think it'd be fun to go there even earlier, and have, maybe pre-IPO. That'd be pretty sweet.
Yeah, that would be sweet.
Yeah, but I think that's what I'd say. There's not another company that immediately comes to mind.
That's fantastic. And you know what? We've had a lot of people, a lot of other guests say, oh yeah, I would have liked to have worked for Google in the earlier stages. So, hey, you were there early enough, so I'm sure many people would have loved to have traded places with you. So, and that also speaks volumes about your courage to actually leave Google and disrupt yourself the way you have. So absolutely love that. And okay, so question number 2 is, if you could ask anybody a question, dead or alive, who would it be and what would you ask?
Oh my goodness. Well, okay. The dead question overwhelms me, because I'm like, oh, there's so many people in history. So
Yeah.
I have to say, one person in a totally different career, but who I admire, Amy Schumer. I've enjoyed learning from her from afar. I've enjoyed seeing the projects that she takes on, her sense of humor, how she's been hustling for 10 years. And it's been cool. So I'm a big advocate of learning from people from afar, not just ones you can actually talk to, though one day, hopefully she'll want to be my BFF. But
I take it you've read her recently released book?
I did.
Yep.
I have to say I liked her head writer, Jesse Klein, also wrote a book at the same time, and I liked that one a little better. But I really love what Amy Schumer's up to. I would want to ask her or Chelsea Handler, how do you have the courage to speak your mind so openly and just, because I'll do some of it, but I think these women are just not afraid at all to piss people off or make a bad impression or be bold. And I admire that. It's awesome.
Yeah. And I think that's something that you've spoken of previously, where, if you care too much about what people think, then you're not going to head out and, pivot or disrupt yourself, because, hey, you spent all this time in university, you've climbed the corporate ladder, society, family, friends expect you to just do what you're doing because you're making all this money. Why would you throw that away? And if we make our decision from a place where we care so much about what other people think, then we're essentially going to limit our own potential.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like such a muscle to build. And I guess partly it's just practicing it.
Yeah.
And taking smaller risks, just like everything we've been talking about.
Definitely. And I guess that's a perfect segue into what I'm about to ask you now. So in terms of your mind being a muscle and practicing it, I ask all of my guests whether or not they have any rituals or routines that help them stay on top of their games. So I know you're a fan of meditation, but perhaps you can elaborate on that, but what other sort of rituals or routines do you partake in, other than drinking bulletproof coffee with your tea in the morning, that help you stay on top of your game?
Yeah, I do. Steve and I were joking, we both do Dave Asprey's brain octane. And I put it in my Reishi Earl Grey tea every morning. That's the first thing I do when I wake up. I sit and read with tea and a candle. And then I will meditate for 20 minutes, and I might read some more after that, journal. I really take my time with my morning wind-up rituals. And then I don't check email after about 4 p.m. So I also start winding down for the day really early. I mean, with exception, but for the most part, I know I'm not going to work after that. My brain is not really functional in that way in the evening. And so I try to, I pretty much assume there's nothing ever that urgent that I have to have looked at email between 5 p.m. and the next morning. And I don't check email until after all my wind-up rituals. So I don't check from bed or anything like that. And and then at night, same thing. I make sure I go for a walk with a friend or to a yoga or Pilates class, and then wind down slowly at night too. Have tea, and sometimes I'll read a fiction book. In the morning, I read more nonfiction. But those are I do tend to enjoy having a lot of structure in my days. And just like we talked about at the very start, I do set boundaries around when I'll do what, and I do schedule blocking. So actually recording a bunch of podcasts on one day, just so that the context switching is not so different. For example, yesterday I had a podcast interview, then a coaching call, then I was delivering a webinar, then I had a consulting business meeting back to back to back. So it was really intense trying to switch my brain to every different context. So in general, I try and batch things when I can. And the reason for that is also that it's really easy to just react and respond. And so if I didn't have boundaries around my time and my energy, it'd be very, very easy to all of a sudden, and this has happened to me in the past, have meetings at all hours of the day, on every day, and not feel that I have big chunks for my own strategic projects.
Yeah, and I think that whole batching approach is so powerful. I mean, I tend to, either backload or front load meetings, which means that I can just get my meetings out of the way and then I can get started on actual work. Otherwise, if your meetings are sporadically taking place throughout the day, you can never really get into flow on anything else that you're working on.
Right.
Yeah, and I also love the whole wind up, wind down thing. Like, not using your phone in bed is definitely a big plus, because it's just going to send your brain on this wild goose chase, chasing rabbits down rabbit holes.
I only learned the hard way because it makes me anxious. So if someone can do that and not get anxious, fine, but for me it's just like, no, it's going to disrupt my whole equilibrium if I do that.
It's by necessity. We get it. It's cool. Awesome. So I guess tell us about the book, Jenny. I imagine obviously people can pick it up on Amazon.com, but I want to ask you the where can they get it question. I'll add that to the show notes. We know where they can get it, but what else can you tell us about the book, and where else can people go to find out a little bit more about you and the amazing work you're doing?
Sure. Well, thank you again for having me. And the book, it's for anybody who's looking to map what's next, either within your current role or business, or a project you're working on, or a bigger career change. So it's not just for the biggest changes. And for example, you can apply the pivot method to just planning your 2017 goals. And so, I encourage everyone, check out pivotmethod.com. I have a private community for side hustlers and solopreneur called Momentum.
Awesome.
I also have a team of 6 pivot coaches. If you want more one-on-one support, we do monthly jump starts where it's just 2 sessions and email in between. And so there's lots of ways to just ignite the pivot that you're hoping to make and get some upfront clarity. And then anyone listening to a show like yours, Steve, is off to the races after that. I find most impactors, once they have the clarity, that they know what to do with it. So that's all, pivotmethod.com. And if you go to /toolkit, there's a big toolkit, lots of free tools and templates. And the book is anywhere books are sold. It's also on audio if you prefer to hear me read to you at bed or while you're running or cooking.
Well, you do have a very soothing voice, Jenny, so.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and I also have a blog at jennyblake.me. Though I've been very negligent in recent weeks, there is a lot of history and archives there too.
Fantastic. Well, I'll make sure to include all of those resources in the show notes for our listeners. So look, thanks so much, Jenny. You've provided a wealth of value bombs, and I'm sure this podcast will go on heavy rotation on a lot of our listeners' iPhones and or Pixels. I think there'll be a lot of listeners transitioning to Pixels in the very near future. But thanks again, Jenny. You've been awesome.
Thank you so much, Steve, and thanks for everybody for listening.
Well, that's it for my conversation with Jenny Blake. Hope you enjoyed that. I had a hell of a fun time chatting to Jenny late at night, but needless to say, I did hit the pillow later that evening, or literally about 10 minutes after I ended this call with Jenny Blake, and fell asleep really quickly. So despite the high energy of that conversation, I was absolutely beat by the end of it. So as always, if you enjoyed that show and haven't taken the time to like, share, or subscribe to Future Squared yet, it would mean a lot to the team if you took just a minute of your time to do so, either on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. Collective Campus has recently revamped its website, so you can check that out and access all types of resources, videos, blogs, books, podcasts, webinars, infographics, all types of good stuff over at www.collectivecamp.us. And we've recently launched our Innovation Insights series on Facebook. So that's our Facebook live video series of short, sharp innovation insights, usually between 2 and 3 minutes, that you can access on a daily basis over at our Facebook page, Collective Campus. So that's it from me. Until next time, as I like to say, keep pivoting, keep disrupting yourself, keep exploring new frontiers, keep challenging the status quo, and I'll probably leave it there. Until next time, Future Squared out.